It's that tranquil time of the evening, and as the sun begins to lose its strength, our young avocet chicks build up theirs. But when you're only a few days old, it can all get a bit exhausting. Time to snuggle up and get cosy, while Mum gets ready for tonight's Springwatch.
Hello and welcome to Springwatch 2022. Sadly, it's the end of our second week, but I can promise you a cracking show. We've got more of those beautiful badgers underground, and we have a film about the most exquisite insect that we have in the UK. One that you may have overlooked, but I have to tell you, the film is absolutely beautiful. Tonight, though, we've left the woodland here at Wild Cairn and we've come down onto the wetland. And wetland is a really important habitat. In England, we've lost 90% of our wetlands, and they're disappearing 3 times faster globally than tropical rainforest. And despite the fact they only occupy 6% of the Earth's land area, they provide a home for 40% of all of the world's species. So our wetlands are really, really important. And out on this wetland, far away over there in the distance, we have our long lens cameraman. I think we can see him now. There he is, Mark Yates. We can see him, but what's he seeing through his camera? Let's have a look. Oh, he's got a little avocet chip there.
Oh, that is so adorable. It's like a mini-me, isn't it?
It's just... Look, you can see already it's feeding successfully for itself. It's only a few days old, and it's learned through trial and error, picking at things in the water. And judging by the look at it, it already knows a shrimp from a piece of weed. And it's enjoying the shrimps without a shred of a doubt.
Well, that's what Mark's seeing, but what have you been seeing? You've been sending in your pictures, and some of you have had some rather unusual sightings. Have a look at this one. You don't often see a marsh harrier looking like that, do you? This is from Rookie Sinfield, and you can see it's quite patchy. It's basically a leucistic marsh harrier. Partial loss of pigmentation causes those white, pale or patchy feathers. It's a genetic condition. And you've seen one recently, haven't you?
Yeah, I was out and about with one of the wildlife camera crew, Nigel, earlier this week, and we saw a harrier with a white rump and a very unusual patterning on its wings. And initially we thought, well, could it be a hen harrier? It just wasn't right. We realised it was a marsh harrier. And when we consulted the journals online, in the field, on our phones, it was a marsh harrier, and it had a very pale rump and pale under the wings.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? People are seeing more and more of them, but that's a leucistic one, we think.
And
anyway.
the males, when they get older, very often have plain white tails, so do note that variation there. Now, if you were watching earlier in the week, you'll know that Jack Smith, a young PhD student, had sent us some remarkable images of burying beetles feeding their young. Well, he's been out and about with his camera too and spotted an otter. An otter, and there it is, with a spotted cat shark on the right-hand side, a rather large one for the otter, but it will soon overpower that and enjoy a feast, I imagine. Thank you very much, Jack.
I'd love to see his photo album. Must be really impressive, mustn't it? Let's have a look at some of our live cameras. Time to catch up with them. Got a good selection. Let's see what we've got. Oh, you can see the herons at the top there, but we're going to go to them a bit later. So I'm going to pick, first of all, the blackcap. Let's have a look at our lovely blackcap nest. I'm very fond of this nest. There's the female with her chestnut cap sitting on the chicks. And let's see what they've been getting up to, because it has been a lovely nest to watch. And the adults have been such good parents. They're the power couple. Look, I mean, they're so desperate to feed their young that they kind of climb on top of each other, bringing insects in and taking fecal sacs out. Another one on its way, and out goes the female, leaving the chicks. Just look at them now, though, and look at them in this shot. They're growing so quickly. They're beginning to spread their wings out. The feathers are coming. We actually think that they could fledge at the weekend, maybe the beginning of next week. And I know they don't look like they're ready yet. Yes, they've got feathers, but they still look like they've got a bit of developing to do, but they are changing very quickly. And when they do fledge, they don't sort of just get off the nest and fly off into the distance. They tend to just get off the nest and then stick around and fly locally. So we may see them go. Let's keep your eye on.
We're down in the wetland tonight, but we mustn't forget how productive the farmland is here at Wild Cairn Hill. They put a tremendous effort into making sure that it's a place that works for both crop growing and wildlife too. So look at this field. You've got the field there, then you've got the margin, you've got the woodland, and that margin is providing plenty of seeds for species like yellowhammers and here turtle dove, one of our fastest declining birds, 93% since 1970. And yet here there's still enough food because of the way they manage the landscape. Our farmland birds in general are pretty much in serious decline, and linnet is amongst them. You don't see half as many linnets as we used to see just a few years ago, but I'm very pleased to say they're still here. And in fact, now for the first time, we can show you that we've got a camera on a nest. Let's go live to our linnet nest. It's tucked down the base of a hedgerow, quite close to the ground, hidden in amongst the bramble. No adults there at the moment, but on this chilly evening, you can see that the chicks are hunkered down in their nest. The adults have been busy, though, I have to say. Here's the female, and she's regurgitating seeds into the mouths of the young. And you see that green patch there? Well, those are the seeds. The young have translucent throats, so you're looking at the seeds they've just swallowed that she's passed to them. When she's finished feeding, she settles down. The male is frequently in attendance. He comes back, she then begs for the food. You can see her wings quivering there, stimulates him to feed, not the chicks, but to feed her. One wonders whether she's going to continue a little bit more digestion before she passes them on to the youngsters. He then disappears, and sure enough, she prepares that meal and then begins to distribute it to the chicks. So remember, this is a big feed. There's a whole pile of seeds filling her crop, and she shares it equally amongst all of those chicks, a process that takes a few minutes sometimes.
But how different is the feeding technique of the linnet, which is feeding its chicks seeds, and the blackcap, which is feeding its chicks insects? Well, let's have a look and compare the two. Now, if you look at the linnet, look how it's systematically going round each chick, making sure that each chick gets fed in one feed. Now, the blackcaps can't do that because they can only hold one, possibly two insects in their beak at a time. So they've got to keep coming back, and they can only feed one chick, sometimes two chicks, each time they fly in. And so we had a look to see how many feeds they were doing per hour on average. Blackcap, 26 feeds per hour. The linnet, 2 feeds per hour. So it's a big difference. It seems like it's a lot more work for those blackcaps. But the linnet, as you can see in that particular shot, takes ages to do that one feed. And look at that. Did you see the yellow there? I mean, when you showed it was green. They've got yellow seeds now. It's extraordinary. It's a bit like my jacket, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's fluorescent.
So there's two completely different foraging techniques there. The male linnet is spending a lot more time away from the nest, at a greater distance from the nest, gathering that seed. And seed-eating farmland birds get their seeds from different places. Some of them take them from higher in the trees, some from the grasses, things like the turtle dove off the ground. Linnets normally take them from quite low to the ground. He then comes back, passes them to the female, who then passes a much larger meal on to those youngsters. So a different technique, but obviously equally profitable when it comes to rearing their young. Another nest that we've been looking at here, Wild Cairn, and we've enjoyed rather a lot actually, has been our herons, an unruly bunch down on the marsh here. This is what they were up to earlier this evening. Yeah.
Oh, look at that. It's mayhem.
It's mealtime mayhem is what it is. Look at another tug of war over an unfortunate rat. And we're not going to stick with them, actually, to see who wins the rat in this case, because I'm pleased to tell you that we've got another camera on another heron's nest. And it's at a very different stage in the breeding cycle. And we can go to it live now. So no raucous antics there. The calm of a brooding heron. because beneath the heron here are 2 eggs and 1 youngster, and you can see them there. So these birds are much later in the breeding cycle. It could be that they're young birds, not a large clutch, that might indicate that, or it could be that they failed earlier in the year and they're having a second go. I'd go for the former of those choices. The youngster, not the prettiest young bird in the world. Well, I don't know, I suppose it takes all sorts, doesn't it? It's already learned that pecking at the bill of the adult is the way to stimulate it to regurgitate that food. And here the adult is sort of plucking up the courage to vomit something pleasant out. And there it is. It's a large chunk of eel, a little bit too big maybe for that chick. It's not going to get that down. So what do the adults do? Well, they basically re-eat the food they've regurgitated. So here a rat's proved a little bit too big for the heron as well. So down it goes, and a little bit more digestion in the stomach of the adult heron will probably do the trick. Look at that, going down the throat.
Lovely.
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 Rat down the throat on a Thursday evening on BBC Two. Nice. And then sometimes they choose the food and it's a little bit more convenient. You can see here it's small fish, little stickleback there, look, on the left-hand side, and the young heron finds it, and I'm sure that's going to slip down far more easily, despite the spines, than a giant rat.
I love that little chick there. It looks like a muppet, doesn't it? It's amazing. It's so tiny. It's got such a long way to grow until it's an adult size. But you know, we've been watching quite a few of our wetland birds here at Wild Ken, and I'm pleased to say they're looking pretty healthy. Sadly, the same can't be said for other water birds and birds of prey around the country, because in some areas they're really not faring very well. And if you remember, in Winterwatch, we were talking about avian flu and a new variant which is highly infectious and had particularly affected the Svalbard population of barnacle geese that overwinter on the Solway Firth. In fact, tens of thousands of them had died of this new variant of avian flu. They'd lost over a third of the population. Well, we've got an update, and I wish I could give you good news, but unfortunately it's got worse. It's bad news, I'm afraid.
Highly pathogenic avian influenza arises in the poultry farms of the Far East, and due to the transportation of that poultry, it arrives in Europe. It's spread by secretions that come from the bird's eyes, nostrils and mouths, and faeces too. And when the birds get it, they generally succumb within 28 hours. It's a miserable death. Respiratory problems, diarrhea and a swollen head. And when you see the birds suffering, you can only imagine that it's terribly painful. But perhaps even worse, it's so virulent that it can survive for a long time outside the bird's body. It can survive for a month at 4 degrees centigrade and for more than 30 days in the freezing waters of lakes. And for that reason, lots of birds are able to contract it long after those who've had it and passed away have left it there as a horrid legacy. Now, here in Norfolk, dead birds are being picked up. We've got important breeding colonies of terns here in North Norfolk. At one of them, they found more than 40 corpses. I've got to tell you, they haven't been tested yet. We can't say for sure that these birds have perished due to avian influenza, but of course, there's a very good chance that they have. And I know that north of the border, Yolo, things are very, very serious indeed.
Yeah, some very, very grim scenes up here, Chris. And it's important to note that bird flu can affect all birds, but of course, those it's likely to have most impact on are the colony nesters. And up here in Scotland, we have some of the biggest seabird colonies, not just in Britain and Europe, but in the whole world. And it's here we think we'll see the worst impact of bird flu over the next few months. Now, the worst hit are the northernmost islands, particularly Shetland, some big gannet trees up there, Hermanus and Nos, and ornithologists report seeing hundreds of dead and dying birds on the sea cliffs, on the beaches and in the sea below. And it's even got right across to St Kilda, the second biggest gannet tree in the world there, 60,000 pairs. But it's not just gannets, it's all kinds of seabirds, and in particular great skewers. Look at this poor bird. And we've heard that the colony at Hermanus and also out on St Kilda has been absolutely decimated by this disease. Now, it's traumatic for us to witness those scenes and for the ornithologists out there, but it's an absolute tragedy for these birds. And with a long breeding season, it's likely to get a lot worse as well. And Meg's down there in the north of England. I know that you're right in the middle of it right now.
Yes, Yolo, I am, very sadly. The last night, you might remember, I was filming just on a beach over here, and behind me is the wonderful Coquette Island with a beautiful colony of seabirds on it. But literally 10 metres from my feet was a dead gannet. I walked on another 10 metres, there was another dead gannet, and if I continued along that beach, I'm sure I would have found a lot more. And after the broadcast last night, we filmed some quite emotive footage, and I just want you to take a minute to think about this story and just watch. It's really a horrible sight, isn't it? It honestly makes me feel incredibly sad to see it. And in this area in the last week, there's been notifications of 16 gannets that have been found along Druridge Bay, and potentially many more to come in the breeding season, especially because gannets are quite an extended breeder. They won't leave until October, so like Yolo says, big colonies causes big problems. But this morning I spoke to a professor to understand more about the future. What are the solutions and how can we help protect these birds? And I really wish that I had an easy answer for you, and sadly I don't, because we're still learning more about it and we're still trying to understand the situation. What we do know is that it's not only restricted to birds. There have been cases where foxes have scavenged, even horses. There's even been a case in a tiger where avian influenza has gone big. So if you do ever come across a bird on the ground, please make sure you don't touch it, and you can contact the DEFRA hotline on the number below and to report any sightings that you see, and there's lots more information on our website too. Now, scientists are calling for tighter restrictions on the import and exportation of poultry, namely chicken, and there's of course lots of things that we can do by raising awareness and talking about the issues, telling one another. Very important. Very sad. Not the kind of story I wish to be reporting, but it's happening and therefore we have to talk about it. Now, Springwatch is all about escapism. It's all about enjoying nature and motivating us to get out there and protect it. So after that really difficult, hard story, immerse yourself in the beauty, the elegance and the stunning nature of lacewings.
Head into the countryside, or even just your garden, on a warm spring evening, and the chances are that one of these tiny insects will be fluttering close by. The common green lacewing. As the name suggests, they're widespread across the UK. But at just over a centimetre long and most active when darkness falls, you may not have noticed them at all, which is a shame, because they are a splendid sight indeed. A bright lime green slender body and eyes like golden hemispheres, long thread-like antennae and delicately veined iridescent wings. But don't be fooled by their dainty appearance, because these beautiful beings began life as ferocious predators. Just a few weeks ago, they looked somewhat different. And in this larval stage, they have an insatiable appetite for one thing in particular: aphids. Using its pincer-like mandibles, it grasps its victim, lifting it into the air to prevent escape. Next, it injects enzymes into the aphid's body, liquidizing its internal organs before sucking out the contents. It's a grisly end indeed. A single lacewing larvae will gobble up 200 to 300 aphids in a week, an appetite that's earned them the nickname aphid lions. and made them the gardener's best friend. But after around 3 weeks of gorging, it's time for a change. The larvae chooses a safe spot on the underside of a leaf and then starts to spin silk. The loose threads come together to form a ball, where it settles down to pupate. Just over a week later, the adults, in all of their glistening glory, emerge. And with their new resplendent attire, they have one thing on their mind: finding a mate. Their new form means they're perfectly designed to make some sweet music. By vibrating their abdomens, they produce ultra-low frequency songs, which are carried through the stems they're standing on. An irresistible sound that summons potential partners. Soon after mating, the female begins laying eggs. And she's got a neat trick for keeping them out of harm's way. When she's selected a suitable leaf, she produces a long strand of sticky silk from her abdomen. And once it's hardened into a rigid, hair-like stalk, she lays a single cigar-shaped egg right at the tip. And so, leaves all over the garden are bejewelled in this way. Around a week later, the larvae hatch. They might only be a millimetre long, but they emerge complete with their predatory pincers and instinctively head off in search of their aphid banquet. An incredible double life for this iridescent and ever so helpful invertebrate.
Amazing creatures, aren't they, lacewings? And friend of the gardener too, don't forget that. Now, I'm coming inside because the weather here has taken a turn for the worse. I've been here for 2 weeks, we've had glorious sunshine, but finally the rain has arrived. Now, where have I been? Well, the first week, up here in the northwest, Treshnish Farm, with a beautiful bluebell meadow there. Then after that, we've moved east here to the banks of Loch Bar, but we haven't neglected the island. Our wildlife camera team, well, they've been everywhere from the Ross of Mull all the way around. And over the weekend, I have too. I've been wandering around to this area looking for snakes. Well, one snake in particular, the adder, and the habitat here is ideal for them. You've got that mix of moorland, some tall vegetation for shelter, some lower vegetation and bare areas for these animals to bask, plenty of voles, of course, their food as well. And local naturalist Ewan Miles, well, he's been monitoring the adders on Mull for 12 years. So over the weekend, I went out and I met Ewan just at the end of one of his surveys. So what exactly are you looking for? Where are you looking?
So into this habitat here, you're looking for, I suppose, the sunspots in particular, just open areas where they can come out from the vegetation and they can sun themselves, but they could also be in the vegetation. So you're looking within the bracken ferns as well as the heather and the scrubby areas.
And of course, they're so well camouflaged. And you'd think, you see an adder out in the open, you think, oh, I'd see that. Once they're in the vegetation, they disappear.
It's incredible.
Are they doing well on Mull?
Yeah, they're doing well. You know, Mull's like what the UK was like maybe 50, 100 years ago in terms of just that more larger scale habitats and connectivity. You've got heather, you've got bracken, you've got big south-facing bankings that maximise the amount of sun again. They are doing well here, not so well on the mainland, unfortunately. They're doing better here. This is an important area for them.
And they're beautiful things as well. You know, when you get a close-up view of an adder, it is a stunner, isn't it?
Yeah, they are. That red jewel of an eye. It's just incredible, isn't it? And yeah, they obviously can get demonised as well, sadly, but they're beautiful animals and heavily misunderstood, of course. So, you know, it's important to champion these animals and sort of raise awareness of how wonderful they are. They're part of the ecosystems here, and they're a magical animal which has lived on this planet for a long time, and we need to respect them as much as we can.
You say they're doing well here on Mull. Any natural enemies?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, buzzards do like them. They'll sort of hover over the bracken and vegetation and then come down and take an adder. Eagles, golden eagles and white-tailed eagles, feral cats, non-native animals could target them as well. Roads as well, like roads and tracks, they can bask on the roads, and they're quite slow in the mid-morning, the adders. They sort of take time to warm up. So, yeah, there's threats on Mull in terms of predation as well as issues on the roads.
One of the key things, of course, is not to cause them disturbance, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. You need to keep your distance. If you see an adder from a certain distance, yeah, just do not intrude. You can get fantastic views with your binoculars. You've got cameras as well. You can use a telephoto lens to keep 3, 4, 5, 6 metres away. Make sure that it stays where it is and you're not affecting the behaviour of the animal.
So I always think it's a really good day when you've been out looking for adders, you've found an adder, you've watched it, you've enjoyed it, you've photographed it if you want to, and you walk away and the adder's still there undisturbed.
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it? You're happy, the wildlife's happy as well, so it's win-win, yeah.
He's such a lovely man, that Ewan, and some wise words from him there. So 12 years of data, what has he found out? Well, he's actually mapped them out. Have a look at this. Go back to a map of Mull. We're here, of course, and what you see is that you get pockets of distribution of adders. He's got 85 locations all around Mull, and last year alone, he found 9 new locations. Now, there will be some areas where you will not find adder, the conifer plantations, Benmore, the high tops there, but Ewan is adamant that there are more adders out there to be found yet. And when I was out with him, I tell you what, I found a real nature gem. Let me put those down for a minute there. Let me show you this. Look at that. Look at that. That is a sloughed adder skin. Periodically, adders will shed their skin. Judging by the size of this, I think that's probably a female. It's made of keratin, the same substance as our nails and hair. And why do they slough their skin? Well, mainly in order to grow. It's like when you go from being a toddler to being a teen, you need new clothes. Well, the adder needs exactly the same. They also slough to get rid of parasites as well. But isn't that brilliant? Look at that. And that now is going to have pride of place on my nature table at home. I love that. And Megs, I bet you had a fantastic nature table, didn't you, when you were young? But did you have an adder skin?
I did have the most amazing nature table, and I'm still collecting. Of course, you have to as you go, don't you? But I don't have an adder skin. And if I did, that would go right to the top of the shelf. I'm quite envious of your adder skin, you know. That is pretty cool, if I do say so myself. Now, yesterday, I introduced you to the wonderful Cocket Island, which is right behind me now, which is home to 30,000 puffins. And of course, you can't talk about puffins without talking about their miraculous ornament on their face, their colourful bill, and they use these as such important tools throughout the breeding season. But where does the colour come from? Well, it comes from something called a carotenoid, which is within algae. It helps algae photosynthesize. Zooplankton eat the algae with the carotenoids inside, and then the sand eels eat the zooplankton, which has eaten the algae, which has the carotenoids. So it's all this big trophic circle that goes round, and the most intense puffin with the most intense colour, it's a sign of fitness. So the male and the female, the brightest, they're going to get more attention. It shows that they're doing well with that environment. But at this time of year, of course, those bills are pretty important because they're flying over trying to find all of those sand eels. And it's really impressive. On average, they can get about 10 to 20 sand eels in their mouth, but the record is 83. 83 sand eels, and puffins are smaller than you imagine, so really it is quite the accomplishment. But they've got incredibly flexible jaws, and what you can see is that yellow patch on the side, which is called a rosette, which allows them to open their jaw up wider than most seabirds. And if you look really carefully inside the mouth, you can see these things called denticles. They're soft spines, and that helps keep the sand eels in place so that when they fly back with their young, none are going to fall out and they can successfully feed. But these amazing ornaments, of course used for breeding, are really energetically expensive. They don't need them all year round. So when it comes to winter, they don't have any colour on anymore. In fact, they lose the sheath around their bill gets smaller, and you can see it turns black. Now this is at the beginning of winter. They will eventually lose the red in the midst of the winter season. But it is really quite impressive. So impressive, the dramatic change, that actually in the 1870s, people thought that it was an entirely different species. They thought puffins in the summer and puffins in the winter were entirely different animals, which is really cool. I can't actually remember ever seeing a puffin in the winter. So let's go to Norfolk now. Chris and Michaela, have you ever seen a puffin in the winter? Because that's quite a cool sight.
Not me.
I have, but not out at sea. I mean, in the wintertime, they go far out to sea. Unfortunately, when you do see a puffin in the winter, it's because it's washed up dead on the beach, and that's when you see that they've got that, you know, entirely horn-coloured bill, and it's where I got my puffin skull from.
They look so different though, don't they? It's not surprising that people thought that they were a totally different species.
Indeed. Anyway, from puffins to another very brightly coloured bird, not its bill, but its plumage, the black-tailed godwit. It's a wading bird, again, an inhabitant of wetlands, of course, and it's had mixed fortunes here in the UK. By the 19th century, it was probably extinct, down to loss of habitat. And then in the 1930s, it recolonised. By the 1950s, it was breeding regularly. And in the 1970s, there were 65 pairs. But since then, the numbers have been up and down. And I'm sad to say that in Europe, the similar story has been taking place. In the last 25 years, the population of breeding godwits has declined by 50%.
And because of that, WWT and the RSPB got together with the support of lots of other organisations and decided to try and do something about it to boost the numbers here on the Fens. And so they set up Project Godwit, and they took eggs from wild birds, from nests, took them back and let them hatch, and they reared them, and then they released them back into the wild. And by taking those eggs from nests, it also meant that the birds then laid another clutch, which gave them even more hope of increasing the numbers. It's a 5-year project, and this year is their last year, so I was really keen to go and see some of the chicks. So I went off to WWT Welney to meet the team.
Hi, Will. Good to meet you. Oh, my goodness. Oh, look at these guys. Oh, they are adorable. How old are they?
So these guys are 3 days old?
Fresh out the eggs. And they're so interested in what's going on. Oh, so what have you got in here? You've got some heat and a Christmas tree.
Yeah, so they have a heat lamp to keep them nice and warm, lots of soft surfaces, a bit of artificial foliage to get them used to walking around a wetland and practicing.
How long will they be before they go outside?
So these guys will stay in here for about 4 days till they've learned to eat properly, and then they'll go outside to the polytunnel. Should we go have a look at them?
Oh, yeah, well, slightly bigger ones. Oh, they are lovely.
I really wanted to see these chicks because obviously we followed the project from 2017. So just give us a quick reminder about why the project started.
Back in 2017, there was only 3 pairs of godwits here at Welney, and the population over at the Neem was also decreasing because of a loss of habitat and spring flooding and also impacts from predators. So it was decided then that we would remove some of the eggs from the Neem washers, bring them here to Welney, rear them and release them to head start them to give the population a nice boost.
How many chicks have you hatched over the whole project?
So we have released 155 black-tailed godwits, both at the RSPB Neen and here on the Ooze. That equates to about a 40% population increase.
40%? Wow.
Yeah, on those 2 locations. If there was no head starting, it could take up to 2050 to get the same.
I guess the obvious question is, why are you stopping?
So this is the first time a head starting project's been trialled in the UK with a wading bird. So the head starting element is ending this year, but we will continue with the engagement of local people and landowners and try and push towards building bigger, better, more connected wetland habitat, using the black-tailed godwit as this amazing flagship for this type of habitat.
Well, it's clearly been a great success, so you ought to be very proud of yourself. It really has been a great success. And by the end of this year, they estimate 182 chicks they would have put back into the wild. So that's really boosted numbers. As he said, 40% in the fens that they reckon they produce. They've made the number of the pairs go up. Shall I put my teeth in there? so it's been great. But you know what I love? Not only seeing the chicks, but also meeting the team. You know, so dedicated. They put such a lot of work into that. So well done, team.
And it's not just about doing the conservation work, it's understanding the ecology of the birds as well. You can't do the former without the latter. And so long-term studies of birds, even familiar species, are necessary sometimes so that we fully understand what's going on. And just such a study has been undertaken by the University of Sheffield in the Riverlyn Valley. It's long-tailed tits, a very familiar garden species, but getting under the feathers of these birds and really figuring out what's going on takes some effort. So let's join Sarah Biddlescombe now to catch up with the work that Sheffield University have been doing there.
I'm pretty much out here 24/7 monitoring the long-tailed tits. So within the population of the Riverlyn Valley, it's my job to make sure that I know where everyone is, what they're doing, and all the data that's necessary is collected. They're really, really, really busy at this time of year, constantly either building a nest or incubating or feeding their nestlings. So it's a really, really busy time for both the birds and me. So even though I found 114 nests this year, it will be classed as a good year if, say, only 20 of them made it to fledging. This nest got predated by a jay or a crow, and the bird has completely ripped the nest open and taken the chicks out. About 80% of our nests are unfortunately predated, so the long-tailed tits, they do have a really, really hard time. But all is not lost, as the male from this nest has gone to help his sister and to bring up his nieces and nephews for this year. Long-tailed tits are one of the only cooperative breeders in the UK. So after a long-tailed tit has lost its nest, later on in the breeding season, it will decide not to build another nest of its own, but it will go and help a family member provision the chicks at their nest. The way I'm able to identify individuals is by colouring them with little rings that they wear on their legs. So when watching with binoculars, I can tell who is who and how they're related to each other. We ring the chicks on day 11. So I only take out half the birds at a time so that the parents still can come back and feed the other chicks while I process the others. By colour ringing them, I know who the individual is, which nest they came from, and where they're building their first nest. So we know so much about each individual bird. All the chicks are going to get the same striped dark blue on the top, and then they'll all have a different colour underneath. Make sure that ring's nice and closed. The chicks that are from nests that have helpers actually weigh more than those nests that don't have helpers, and this is why they're probably more likely to survive. 8.1. I feel like I've really come to know these birds really well. just up here is a nest of my favourite bird, Yodel. She's 4 years old this year, and this is her 4th breeding season. And she's actually been very successful in comparison to other birds. So she's got a lot of offspring around her. So it's quite likely that she is going to get helped, maybe not this year, but in future years. And I really hope that she is successful this year and can continue on producing her offspring in this area and really like owning this section of the field site. So just over the bridge here, we actually have the nest of Yodel's daughter. Now, I'm actually seeing Yodel's son. I can tell due to his colourings, which is red, dark blue, green on his left leg. This isn't his nest, but he's come to help his sister and be a really good uncle. Now, this is like real typical long-tailed tit behaviour and what we'd expect to see. So against all adversity and all the predation and everything that the long-tailed tits have to go through during a breeding season, they all band together as a family unit to bring up the next generation. This is what makes long-tailed tits so charming, the way they help each other out during difficult times.
I love those long-term studies, all of those scientists, that sequence of researchers that come together to build constantly on the knowledge that each one is adding to. Top work. But 80% losses of nests. 80% loss of nest. How on earth does the bird continue to prosper? Well, the answer you've just seen is that cooperative feeding at the nest, having those helpers which allow them to raise really large broods. Amazing stuff.
I love the nest. It's the sort of thing I'd like to make a giant long tit-tailed nest and get in it. It'd be so snuggly, wouldn't it? Do you want to come with me?
No, I don't want to come in
right.
your nest. No, I just don't. No.
Let's catch up with Kate McRae's badgers. These are badgers that she's been filming in an artificial set which she made and put cameras in. And there's family, Peggy's the mum, and the 2 young cubs. We saw them at 5 weeks old, so now they're 6 weeks old. Here they are. So they're 6 weeks old. They're now about a kilo. Their eyes would have opened for about a week, but their sight still isn't great. But you can see they're really getting those clear markings. I mean, the face looks very much like an adult face. Still making a lot of noise as they suckle from their mum, Peggy. They exclusively suckle for about 2 to 3 months, but weaning only finishes around 4 months. Although by that time they are out of the set and doing a bit of foraging. Now, she's not cleaning the bum there like we've seen before. She's grooming, but they look extremely content. And this is really fantastic footage to get of these 2 cubs as they grow in the set. Look, Mum's completely conked out. Delightful scene, isn't it? Absolutely
it is.
Lovely.
It's fabulous insight into the underground behaviour that we'd otherwise never see. Another thing that Kate noticed was that the older they got, the longer the periods of time that Peggy would spend away from the set. Now, we've already seen this week that she's got to protect them from other badgers. Infanticide and predation are potentially always on the cards, but once they're in the set on their own, they're of course not inactive, these little cubs. They're constantly rolling around and play fighting with one another. Look at this. Rough and tumble at 9 weeks old. And it's strange to think that already, perhaps, whilst they're still underground, and their eyes aren't fully functional, these 2 young animals are establishing a dominance hierarchy which could last a lifetime. Amazing.
It's so wonderful just to be able to watch them, isn't it? Let's have another little look at them before we leave them just for this week. And here they are, all snuggling. Again, 9 weeks old, so they might have been exploring outside by this stage. And look, This is a little threesome spooning, Chris. Oh, that is so gorgeous. I mean, it almost looks like it's 3 adults there with the facial markings.
Yeah.
They're so well defined
Yeah,
now,
look at
aren't
the
they?
head shape of that other animal there. I mean, they are really looking like mini adults now. I was also interested to note there that the sound they were making had changed from something
Yeah.
that I'd never heard young badger cubs before, and that was because they were underground, to a sound that you do hear when they are above
Yeah.
ground, that little whickering call.
And there'll be more badgers next week when we come back on Monday.
But now let's head north of the border to Mull, to Yolo, who's going to be telling
Yeah.
us a little bit about one of our most iconic summer visitors.
Yes, I am indeed. And talking of summer, daylight hours are very long up here at this time of year, and I tend to go to bed around midnight. And the last thing I hear, well, it's cuckoo, cuckoo. And I wake up, what, 6:30 in the morning? First thing I hear, yes, you've guessed it, cuckoo, cuckoo all over again. Cuckoos are doing very well up here on Mull, and that bucks the national trend, because between 1995 and 2018, UK-wide numbers had declined by 38%, but the worst decline was in England. There, they declined by 71%. But up here in Scotland, they'd increased by 54%. So what's going on? Well, there's a variety of factors, but one of the main ones that they discovered by putting satellite tags on some of the birds, they found out that most of the English birds, when they migrate down to Africa, they go straight down through France, Spain, Portugal, and then over to Africa. But most of the Scottish birds go further east, down through Italy, down through Greece. And that eastern route is obviously safer because the survival rate of the birds is much higher. As I said, on Mull we hear a lot of them and occasionally see them too, usually on some overhead wires. This is a typical view of a cuckoo sat up there on the wires. It's about the size of a small dove, I would say. It's a male cookie, that blue-grey head and back, the long tail and long wings, resembling a hawk, really, like a sparrowhawk, and often you see them getting mobbed by small birds because they think it is a raptor. And while the camera team was out, they actually recorded something very interesting. This is another cuckoo. This time it's a female. You can tell that because she's got the rusty collar on her neck. She dives down into the long grass. I thought she was looking for a meadow pipit nest to lay her egg, but when she comes back up, you'll see, she's being mobbed there, look, by a meadow pipit. You'll see that she's got a caterpillar, one of those hairy caterpillars in her beak. Now, there are lots of those up here. It could be a fox moth, drinker moth, northern egger moth caterpillar, and the whole body is covered by these long hairs, so most birds can't eat them. But the cuckoo can. What the cuckoo does is nips the head and then shakes it, and you see the toxins, because they store toxins, shakes those out and then swallows the whole caterpillar. And those long hairs, well, periodically cuckoos can shed the lining of their stomach and bring it up along with all of those hairs as a pellet. Isn't that amazing? Now, Megs, I've always liked them, but the more I learn about cuckoos, I've got to say, the more I admire them. Amazing birds.
Yes, Yolo, they really are. It's my favourite sign of spring. The moment you hear a cuckoo come back, you know that the warmer weather is on its way and spring is going to blossom as wonderfully as it does. Now, if you were watching the show on Tuesday night, you'll remember that we asked for your help. We wanted you to help us name a new species to science, a really cool fungus that parasitises a spider in an old gunpowder shed at WWT's Castle Espy. And while lots of you had so many suggestions, thank you all for getting in contact with us. And I wanted to share some suggestions with you. So we know that the genus is Gibberellula. So Gibberellula Espy pulvis, Espy being the centre where it is, and pulvis being the name for powder. We've got Spider Hunter, Gibberellula Spider Hunter, which was sent in to us by Elsa and Sarah. Lots of people suggested coral because it looks a bit like chloral. A few people suggested Clark after the volunteer that found it. But the person who has named this new species is Ian Hurst, as he came up with Gibberellula Bang Bangus, after of course the gumped powder where it was found, this old disused gunpowder. How cool is that? We have a new fungus that's going to be researched, and hopefully implications of that research might be used for progressing modern medicine in antibiotics, which is a pretty cool find. Gibberellula Bang Bangus. There you go, there you have it. Now I've come down to the southeast part of the reservoir. I'm in Hawksley Nature Reserve, and I've come to the mudflats because I'm going to do some investigating. Now mudflats are a great place to come and look out for species that are a little bit shy, perhaps during the day or nocturnal, because you can find evidence of where they've been. So let's take a little look, shall we? Have a look. Who have we got round here? Oh, let's nail down. This is really cool. Have you seen this? So here we have footprints of a deer. I think roe deer, it's about 4 centimetres long, which is about right. We know that roe deer are in this area, but if you look here, we've got a smaller version. There's a roe deer fawn around here, very secretive, of course. Once they're born in May, June time, they will hide off in the undergrowth, so it's really nice to see evidence. What have we got here? We've got grey heron. You can see the toes going this way, so it's heading off in this direction. Clearly a path here, but I know there's also another path over here. So come have a look, see what we can find, because this is very busy. You can see more roe deer tracks coming along here, and if you look very carefully down here, what you'll see is 4 pads, 4 toe pads, and 1 large pad, indicating a fox. Now, it's a bit of an old track, the mud has set quite a bit, but it's showing there's a lot of activity going along this way, and this is where I get really, I love it all. I love finding out evidence of what's around, but I wanted to see the species as well. So we put out a camera trap to figure out who was going where, and this is who we found. This camera trap was set out by Sophie Webster. Look at that beautiful red fox, not looking its best perhaps on its coat, but still a beautiful sight to see, and a rabbit too. Using its ears, very highly sensitive, to detect any danger before nipping back into the undergrowth. Grey heron there confirms our footprint ID, as well as a lapwing. I've really loved being here in Hawksley. It's an amazing reserve, full of biodiversity. You've got the lake behind me, the reed beds, and of course the coastline. And it's filled with so many magical species. Many of them I've been lucky to see for myself. A mosaic of habitats filled with lots of different terns. Of course, the iconic roseate tern, common Arctic sandwich. Absolutely beautiful. Shell duck chicks. Oh, so cute, and that roe deer that we saw evidence of in the mudflats just a few seconds ago. It's amazing coming to a place like this because you never know what you're going to find, and every day here for me has been a surprise, from bullfinches, red squirrels. The list is honestly endless. And what a great way to end my time here than with a singing skylark. A singing skylark, what more could you want? I've really enjoyed every single second, but it's time for me to continue on my road trip, and now I'm going into the heart of the city centre of Newcastle. Wildlife really is all around us wherever we live, including in the middle of cities, so I can't wait to shine a light a bit on the urban wildlife that lives there. Now, of course, it's time to take a moment. It's one of our favourite moments, so sit back, relax and enjoy a mindfulness moment. No music, no talking, just pure natural sounds of a beautiful bird, one of our favourites, the gorgeous kingfisher.
Oh, kingfishers. Do you know, I love it when you're on a river, kayaking down a river, you see this flash of colour, you follow it, and there's your kingfisher. Beautiful birds.
Yeah.
Oh, stop. What, yeah to the kayaking or yeah to the kingfisher?
I'm very happy with the kingfisher. It's just the kayaking down the river.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We go live to one of our nests. We're running out of time.
I think we should.
Let's go live buzzard. Live buzzard. Ah, there we are. You can see from that shot just how small this buzzard's nest is. I know it might look big, but I can tell you in buzzard terms, it's pretty small. Not much of a platform for those 3 developing chicks.
But let's see what they've been up to, because, as Chris said, that nest is pretty small, isn't it?
Yeah.
Got all the greenery in there. Chicks are growing nicely.
But look, when they're both adults are there with the chicks, there's barely room to move. When they all start wing flapping, which will happen presumably next week if they haven't started already, then it's going to be tricky to hang on.
Let's take a quick look at our red kites live. Let's see what they're up to. Here we go. Now, these are 4 weeks old. Oh, haven't they grown, Chris?
I know.
Look at them. They might fledge on the 18th of June, which is just after we finish. You never know. They might fledge on the last day.
I think they'll be climbing out of that nest, there's no question. And again, to find the space to do sufficient wing flapping.
Oh, look.
Look, well, there we are. Look at the wings already. Short in the primaries, but quite broad, and very little down left on them at all.
They're certainly getting a lot of exercise, branching out, which is exactly what you'd expect them to do at this stage. And in fact, so many of our birds are developing well, and who knows which ones will still be here next week. We're at the end of our 2nd week now. It's always the same, isn't it? The Springwatch season goes way too quickly. Another week to go, and we will be keeping our eyes on all of our birds, because who knows, as I say, what's going to happen to birds like our gorgeous kestrels. Will they fledge? Well, if they do, we'll certainly know about it on Monday.
I'll be getting to know some of the famous residents of Newcastle, the kittiwakes.
And I'm going to be looking at Mull's magnificent eagles.
Yeah, that's it. Next week, plenty of activity, I have to say. Hannah Stitful will be back at 1 o'clock on Monday on our social media platforms. Her guest will be Megan. If you see anything whilst you're out and about over the weekend, then do send it to our Twitter, Facebook or Instagram accounts. And remember, this weekend is Pond Watch. So watch your pond, and if you haven't got a pond, watch someone else's and send the results in. See you Monday.
Bye-bye.
Bye. To find out more about uncovering urban wildlife and about how regenerative farming affects our countryside, go to bbc.co.uk/Springwatch and follow the links to the Open University.